let's see, there's that, and there's that. Okay.
Oh, and I've got it. Yay. Do you have your book, Jenny? Do you have Unsinkable?
Yes, I do.
There it is.
That cover is to die for.
No.
It's such a good cover.
No wonder it was a USA Today bestseller. Like,
just for the cover.
No.
Oh,
the cover
and the
was
story, but the cover's
Just for the cover.
just for the cover. Covers are important though. As people are joining us, welcome everybody. We're just chit-chatting a little bit while everybody gets settled. But we'll have time to talk about this later. But covers are so important. I mean, that is, and there's just so many nuances, and most people, most authors, you really don't have a lot to do with the cover.
And I think that our team, Jenny and I work with the same cover designer for our books because we're at the same publisher, but I think that a lot of readers don't understand how much goes into the covers and the titles. There are title meetings for every book, and most authors never get to keep the title that they use in their working draft. I've done 22 published books now, and I've only been able to keep one of my titles.
Wow.
So it's a lot about the reader and what is popular. And for readers, that's why you're going and you're seeing a ton of covers that look kind of the same. Woman facing away. It's because it's a proven way of luring.
It's marketing, it's stores, it's all of that. All right, so we are going to chat up a little bit. Before, one thing I always like to ask as people are coming into, Jenny, is where we're all at. So Jenny, where are you calling in from?
I'm from outside of Philadelphia.
Okay. And what's the weather like for you right now?
It was actually warmer-ish today. It was like 40s, and we saw the sun. So I mean, as long as the sun is out, I'm pretty happy.
Exactly. And Rachel, you're coming in from
I'm in Toronto, and it actually feels like April today instead of February. There's no snow. I don't know what this means in American, but it's 10 degrees, which is very
warm,
balmy for us at this time of the year. So we haven't really had a winter. We've had a few snowstorms, but the snow hasn't stayed. So I'm partly terrified, but also kind of enjoying it.
I know. There's a double-edged sword to it, because we're located in La Jolla, San Diego, California, and we're having that California torrential rains, which we rarely get.
Yeah.
And so we're like you said, we're enjoying the fact that it's like, there's some dangerous things that are happening, but as far as just like having water and weather in Southern California is a plus, because we've been in a drought for so long. But there's some double-edged sword to that.
Nashville has had more snow than Toronto this year.
Oh, wow.
Crazy.
So
that's crazy.
We should have sent them our plows and our winter tires.
Okay, so for tonight, just real quickly, if you have, let's see, Rachel and Jenny are going to chat for about 30-ish minutes. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Pop a question in. We'd love to have audience questions as well. Rachel always does a great job, but there's always one or two questions that the audience comes up with. In the chat, I'm going to put the how to order Jenny's book from us. So if you're in San Diego, we'd love to see you at the store, but we can ship this book anywhere in the country. Sorry, not to Canada, but anywhere else in the US.
That's okay. We still love Warwicks in Canada.
I know. Thank you for that.
As an ambassador.
As an ambassador, we love it. So let me introduce these lovely ladies, and I will go off screen and they'll have a great conversation. So Jenni L. Walsh is the author of historical novels Becoming Bonnie, Side by Side, A Betting Woman, and The Call of the Wrens. She also writes books for children, including the nonfiction She Dared series, and historical novels Hetty and the London Blitz, I Am Defiance, By the Light of Fireflies, and Over and Out. She's here today to talk to us about her new book, Unsinkable, which we just saw that wonderful cover.
Yes, it's so pretty.
There it is. And joining her is Rachel McMann. Those of you that watch us regularly know Rachel, who we just adore and does the best interviews. But those of you that are new to us, Rachel is the author of several, as she said, 22 or more books, which include historical and contemporary books. She's an agent. She's all around busy, busy, busy in the literary world. And we love that she takes time to do these author interviews with us. So with that, ladies, have a great conversation. I just saw a dog walk by.
Yes,
I know, it's the best.
I
I
have
love when
multiple
animals
pets.
show up. I
Me
love
too.
it.
Love the cameos by the dog. So you guys have a great conversation, and we'll see you in about a half
Thank
hour.
you.
And one of the things we should mention, everybody, is that Unsinkable debuted on the USA Today bestseller list, which was very exciting. And now Jenni Walsh forevermore can put Jenni Walsh, best-selling author. And she kind of is best-selling in my heart.
Oh,
And,
sweetest.
so Jenni, this story is unforgettable. You have such an arresting and wonderful style of writing. You seamlessly move from, adult books to children's novels and middle grade, which I think is far more difficult because you have to be like, how can I make this sound cool to a 12-year-old? Yay. It's incredible what you do. And, of course, Julie just listed off some of your past books, and you write a lot of biographical fiction that features real live characters. So readers, when Julie mentioned Becoming Bonnie and Side by Side and Betting Woman, these are real people. Becoming Bonnie and Side by Side are actually Bonnie and Clyde. If you've ever wanted to read a novelization is such a terrible term. Let's do that better. A biofiction infused with the spirit of, let's rewind, of those two iconic American characters. You have those there. And Betting Woman, I am blanking on the name of the real woman it is based on, but can you tell us a little bit about Betting Woman before we get into Unsinkable?
Yeah, I would love to. So, A Betting Woman is about a woman named Eleanor Dumont. But she was born by a different name, Simone Jules. And then later in life, she got a horrible nickname of Madame Mustache. Or at least at first, I thought it was horrible. And then I started learning more about Eleanor, and she's the reason why in America we have blackjack. Like, she's like the mother of blackjack. She went into taverns at a time where women were not allowed in taverns unless you're doing very specific services. And she was like, no, I'm going to play cards. I'm going to deal cards. And she had to force her way in, and she made a name for herself. And then at one point, she bested a man. He got mad at her, and he called her Madame Mustache because of a little fuzz that she had on her upper lip. And at first, I was so annoyed for her. And I was like, I am going to write a novel. I am going to set the story straight. This is going to be like, stick it to the man. I was all fired up. And then I started learning more about Eleanor, and I was like, no, you know what? She was business savvy and tenacious. And I think she used that nickname to her advantage because it forever cemented her in history. And that's how she's known today. So I kind of reworked and re-angled the whole novel and made it this just like celebration of her owning who she is.
That's awesome. And one of the reasons I bring these past books up in publishing, we call them an author's backlist. But when you discover a new writer, and I hope many new readers discover Jenni through USA Today bestseller Unsinkable, it's really important to go back and see what Jenni has pursued in the past that you might not have heard of. So she writes amazing biographical fiction. And my first question for you is, have you reached the point where you know when the facts end and your imagination or your desire to color in the lines of history, given what little you're able to work with, begins? How do you differentiate, okay, I've got to get these facts in, this is a real person, this is Violet Jessup in Unsinkable. Does your brain have a click moment where it's like, okay, now it's Jenni's turn to try and flesh out what I imagine Violet was going through?
I think there is. I don't know if I'm conscious of it, if that makes sense, because as any novelist who's basing it off of a real person or a real event or real time in history, we want it to be as authentic as possible. Like, that's my goal. Like, I don't like when I get the mean emails from readers saying, you got the shoe wrong, or, like they wouldn't have had that bag. Like, and I'm not trying to give them the wrong bag. I'm trying to stay as authentic as possible. But there does come a point where there's a moment in time where you need to just use your imagination to complete the scene. And I think that's where the click happens. And it's like, okay, I've taken it as far as I can take it with the research, and now I need to flesh it out. And I think that's where like the real fun begins, because then you get to, pick the setting that they're in and the emotions and all the craziness that happens to them.
And it's such a skill. And a few weeks ago, I was in conversation, if anyone remembers, with Vanessa Miller, who wrote The American Queen and really did this amazing job of imagining a woman who has broad strokes of her life painted throughout history, but you have to kind of color it in. And you have said to me before in our online chats that you actually prefer writing biographical fiction, something that absolutely terrifies me, because and my friend Bryn Turnbull, who we've also talked to here at Warwick's, she loves the same. Real people give you a roadmap of where you're supposed to go. So do you start with an outline of the major things you want to hit in Violet Jessup's life? I mean, obviously Violet Jessup is a huge figure who had, she was kind of a part of many historical iconic moments. How do you approach writing about real people like Bonnie and Clyde and Madame Mustache and Violet?
Well, first, I love that they have their own memoir. That's like the best thing that you can get. Or just like tons of documentation. Like there were so many stories of Bonnie Parker. Eleanor Dumont, there was a lot less, but I found like diaries of other women that was really helpful. And then with Violet Jessup, she had her own memoir. And sorry if you can hear the dog going
No,
to
I
town
love the dog. The
on
dog
his
is so
bird
cool.
now. He's like, we have like the whole house, and he picked to chew his bone literally like right here. So sorry
Because
if
he
you
loves you.
yeah. All day long. But yeah, so Violet had a memoir, and the first thing that I chose to do, which might seem a bit bonkers, is I rewrote it. I put it out in front of me and I just started typing, and I rewrote the whole thing. And as I was rewriting, I just made myself notes of things that seemed really important, things that were like, maybe I want to include this, and other things that are like, no, like that's kind of like divergent from the story that I have in my mind. But if I wanted it, it's there because I retyped the whole thing. And then at the end of it, when I'm all done, like Violet's voice was in my head. And it really sets me up for success to like tell the voice, because getting the voice right is probably like the most important thing to me. Like, leave the phone. I just want people to be like, wow, this novel's voicey.
And that's exactly what you do with all of your fiction. Is the voice is very intimate. It's first person. So readers who are joining in, first person means that she is using Violet's voice, as in Violet uses I and my and me instead of Violet said and she did. We're hearing directly from Violet. And Violet, of course, was one of the women who survived the Titanic.
Right.
That's only part of her story. That's actually an opening chapter of her story. Can you imagine where that is actually, okay, we start with that, but then she does all these other awesome things. The Titanic mythology and iconography is so rampant in fiction, and experiencing right now a bit of a renaissance in publishing. We've got your book out. We've got Annalie Huber's Sisters of Fortune coming out next month. What, if anything, did you learn researching Violet's life about the Titanic that maybe you didn't know before from films and books and that tragedy that happened last year when those explorers went to try and find it? Was there anything about Titanic that you learned in your research that had not come to forefront in your brain before?
There's a couple things, and I will say one of my proudest moments after writing the novel was I had a couple people reach out to me and say that they learned new things. And I was like, oh, that's amazing, because like one thing that I didn't want to do was just rehash the same things that everyone has known about the Titanic.
Because every grade 6 girl goes through a Titanic phase.
It's so my daughter's 10 and she's kind of in that phase right
Oh
now.
yeah, she must love this book.
Yeah. She keeps begging to read it. And I'm like, well, it's a pretty clean book, but you're 10. We're gonna wait a little bit.
Yeah.
But one thing that I thought was so interesting that was years before the Titanic, and I want to say, and one thing that you know too is like we write these books like a year and a half, 2 years ago. So like some of the research is a bit spotty in my brain. So bear with me.
Because she's already written other entire books, everybody.
Yeah.
This is a while ago.
But I believe it was around 18 years, but don't quote me, before Titanic. And someone else had written a book that literally foreshadowed exactly what was going to happen. And that author ended up being on Titanic and he sank with the ship. So it's so interesting to me that he wrote about a thing, I think, and I'm pretty sure, again, my memory, I'm pretty sure that the ship he wrote about was named Titan and it sunk because they didn't have enough lifeboats. And then he himself got on Titanic.
He foretold his own doom.
He did. So I thought that was so interesting. So I had to put that detail in the book. And then there was also another book even prior to that one that was not as on the head, but very similar. So there was like two different moments in literature that like foreshadowed the Titanic sinking.
That's
So interesting.
so eerie too.
Yes.
And you had obviously written Call of the Wrens, which is about World War I, World War II, the messengers on motorcycles, the women who were able to distribute messages to the front lines. How did Violet Jessup fall in your lap? Had she been a person of interest in like your writing folder of someday I want to pursue this, or how did you first stumble upon her?
It's not exactly clear to me. I have like a long list of women, and I think at some point she got on my list. But I also, for years, have wanted to write about Titanic, probably, for like 5 or 6 years. And I couldn't find my way in. I had some different story ideas that I tried to get off the ground, and I was like, no, that's not good. That's not good. Like, if something's not high concept in my brain, I just ditch it immediately. It needs to just be really simple and big. And I'm like, oh, Violet Jessup, you survived 3 shipwrecks. Yeah, okay, like that's big. I could do that. But I think I saw Violet on my list and I was like, oh yes, like she's the Titanic one. I want to write that one. And then that kind of kicked things off.
And it's really cool because she did survive 3 shipwrecks.
Mm-hmm.
And her moment and her biography hits on so many iconic moments in history, especially 20th century history. And you get to write these iconic moments that are actually stamped on the public consciousness, like the sinking of the Titanic. Bonnie and Clyde, for one, we all know that story. How do you approach and bolster the confidence to get back into these stories that everybody already knows? I mean, as someone who doesn't write real people, there's a safety net in not having to uphold their lives, but you do it. So you make it seem so effortless and so brilliant. How do you have moments where you're like, ugh, I've got to ramp up? Or how do you get in the headspace to be like, nope, this is what I'm doing. I know how to write this moment.
Well, I think it begins honestly with like overconfidence, where I'm like, oh, that's such a cool woman. I'm gonna write a story about her. And then and it sells, or I'm under contract, and then I start writing it, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, what
what did I get myself
what
into?
did I just do? Now I have to pay this off, and I need to write this story, and I want to make sure I do its due diligence. So yeah, it's overconfidence, then followed by panic. And then then I mean, you sink into a story and slowly but surely it comes together. And then you start to feel good about some parts and start to panic about some other parts. And then in the end, you come to a happy place, or at least we try.
You try, and then it's published, and then months later you're like, I still wanted to do that.
Yeah.
But you didn't have time. And you do write, and you spoke to this because you said that you actually typed out her memoirs. You do write what I feel is just this gripping first person narrative. So we feel like we're actually meeting Violet and she's actually sitting across from us. And again with Daphne is the other part of this narrative. She's a made up woman who's a composition of really wonderful heroines of the time period. How did you did Violet talk to you in your sleep? Did you have trouble shaking off Violet at the end of the day when you went back to, like, cook dinner for your kids or try to, like, leave Violet behind? How was it to be so immersed in the psyche of someone who saw such tragedy? And we see this painted when you actually write the ship sinking and her witness to it.
Mm-hmm. There were some days where I really struggled to get into the mindset and switch, especially because with Unsinkable, I wrote a different character every day. Sorry, they are being so loud. I hope it's not coming through too much.
I can't hear anything. No.
Okay, it's just on my end. They're both, so the two dogs are both following each other back and forth right in front of my desk
They
now.
just want to be a part of this. I love it.
With The Call of the Wrens, I actually wrote one time frame in one voice all the way through.
Wow.
And then I went back and wrote the second point of view and then interspersed them. So they ended up, alternating chapters, but I wrote one voice all the way through. And that really allowed me to stay in Marion or Evelyn's head. But with Unsinkable, I knew it was going to be harder to align the chapters because the stories are very separate. And then there's a moment where they come together. But I still wanted the moments to align. Like when Daphne is having a highly emotional part of the book, I wanted Violet to also match the emotions. And I wanted there to be like high action the same time there was high action. And then,
yes.
And kind of have the chapters lead into each other, even though they were different people. So that one was like really important for me to go back and forth as I was writing. So there was times where I was like, okay, today I am Daphne. I am in France. I am a spy. I am a good spy. Let's get into this. I'm like, and I like Evan. Evan's my man, not Leo. I have Evan today.
Oh, I love Evan. I love him.
So I had to give myself little pep talks. And then there were so many times where I would mix up like Evan or Leo's name or different character names and be like, nope, I am not on a ship right now. I am in a jail in France. And
and you forget what book you're in. That's
yeah.
just me. Like, wait, which one am I working on?
Yeah.
Violet's story has so much to offer, obviously rooted in history, but you also counter it with Daphne's story. And I think that you've already answered this by going through how you approached writing one voice and then the other. But why was it important for you to have another female viewpoint in Violet's story? Why was there the echo of another woman who is in the future a spy in World War II France? I know that there's a lot about Violet. Did you feel that you needed to counterbalance it with another experience?
So I'll talk around this a little bit because I don't want to give away the complete connection between my two
Yes.
ladies.
Okay, yes.
But there was a moment when I was researching Violet and there was the opportunity to include another character that she would eventually meet. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like that. And that moment just like sang to me. And I was like, okay, I need to get to that moment. But in order to get to that moment, I had to make up a whole other character and give her a background and give her motivations and goals. And it was Daphne existed for that moment. And it's funny as an author.
Wow. So you were driven by this one thing that you just had to have.
Yes. And it's funny how we get stuck on those things. And it's like, all right, whatever I have to do to make that moment happen. And that thing to make it happen was a whole other character.
Oh, that's so cool, because I did wonder if maybe, sometimes, and actually, spoiler alert, Jenny and I have the same editor, and sometimes editors see something like, this is a great story, but do you know what would make it even better if we had someone else that readers could potentially relate to? But the fact that you had this from the very beginning leading to a moment is just shows us how your brain works when you're sifting through research and deciding what to funnel your vision into. Good Lord, you're smart, Jenni Walsh. I think you're the best thing ever. This book is so smart, everybody. It's so smart and it's so readable. My mom always told me growing up to look for people who make it look easy, because they're the brilliant ones. And Jenni makes it look easy, because you'll look up from the book and time has passed and you're like, how am I still reading? What? And it's because you're such a good storyteller. And you learn a lot without realizing you're learning a lot. In your afternote, you posit the question that you asked yourself many times. And this isn't a spoiler, it's just, why did she keep getting back on ships? The spoiler alert is that it actually does open with the Titanic type actions. So spoiler alert, Violet Jessup survives the Titanic. She is unsinkable. And what, like, did you always have that? Like, how did you wrangle the tenacity of this woman to be like, wow, I really need to get on her psyche to ask this question? Like, would you have gotten on another ship? I sure as heck wouldn't. I'd be like,
No.
no, I'm over this.
Yeah, I would not have gotten on 3 ships that.
That too. And the second one seemed worse than the first.
Yeah, that one,
Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm trying not to give anything away, but so that was the Britannic. I can say that much. And I will say that what she dealt with on the Britannic was probably 10 times worse than Titanic. And obviously that was horrific. So
it's just, this book is escalating disasters, everybody, but don't worry, it all works out in the end. And then you parallel that with the extraordinary journey of Daphne in, working in espionage in World War II and being very good at her job. And this is something that harkens back to Call of the Wrens. Were you able to recycle any research from Wrens into getting into the mindset for Unsinkable?
a little bit, just because they're both in France.
Yeah.
But Call the Wrens was so pigeon heavy.
It's a very, if you like pigeons, have I got a book for you?
Yes. Because Marion in the Call the Wrens, as you know, she has to train pigeons. And I thought it was going to be simple to find all this research on how to train pigeons, because I mean, get there. And how do they actually get there? Why don't they just fly away? So I have like all these questions about pigeons that I never thought I was going to have. And then I started researching it, and apparently it was like a very like closed door pigeon knowledge. Like no one talked about the pigeons. So it was so challenging to find those details. So I spent so much time trying to unearth the secrets of homing pigeons. It's so bizarre.
It's sort of fun. And if you ever, I spent a lot of time at Bletchley Park in the UK researching London Restoration and Mozart Code. There's an entire room and display devoted to pigeons at Bletchley Park. So if you ever go and visit the code breaking house that is Bletchley and has been popularized by so many authors now, there is an ode to the pigeons, those great wartime heroes, that are kind of like your friends now, I guess.
I know. There's no pigeons in Unsinkable, so I had to leave all that knowledge behind and
sadly, to come again. You will have them again someday.
Yeah.
Both Violet and Daphne And again, spoiler, they have happy-ish moments, and they've got, even though they see remarkable things that are sometimes beyond what our, you know, normal human comprehension can wrap around, like we have not been in a lifeboat or in the Carpathia or any of that. You balance it with women who are actually very human and have the same loves and losses. And Violet has some major relationship issues. We won't go into that in great detail. Why was it so important for you to, and you do this in all your books, you write iconic people who are names in history, but you ground them in emotional journeys that we can identify with. Is that part of what draws you to writing biographical fiction?
I think it is. And I find it so interesting that, I mean, 80 years can pass and we still have the same obstacles of having a duty to family while also wanting to serve ourselves and having aspirations, but having to put them on hold, you know, while helping others. And it who we were then is who we are now. It's just different scenarios and different settings. And I find that so interesting that that dynamic still exists. And I think I unknowingly like put myself and people in my lives in my books into those characters in different situations. I remember I was at a event for the Call of the Wrens, and a question just like knocked me over. And someone was like, "Oh, you know that one character that was like this person in your life, wasn't it?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, it was." Like I didn't realize that I did
I
that.
love that readers stumble on stuff and it's like, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
Yay.
I'm like 100% was. So I love the relatability of it, and when we just see ourselves, even if it's not meant to be us, and I just think it's so inspirational.
And it's really empowering because you can survive 3 shipwrecks, everybody.
Yeah.
Even if it's a metaphorical shipwreck or an actual shipwreck. And before we get to reader questions, and I'm cognizant of the time here, I've got 2 more questions for Jenni, and one of them is just going to be about if you think Unsinkable is unsinkable. Wait till you hear what she's doing next. But a selfish question I want to ask you is, because obviously you debuted on the USA Today bestseller list. This is your first novel of many that had that accolade. Where were you when you found out? And what was that moment like for every aspiring writer
Oh
here,
my
or
gosh.
anyone who's ever wanted to know what that level of awesome feels like?
It's so funny that you asked that question because I told like my neighbors this, but I haven't told like
Oh,
any.
and I don't want to put you on the spot. If it's a private moment, like I was
No,
in the bathtub.
had all my clothes on. No, I was actually scooping my cat's litter box, like
Love
down
it.
to my hands and knees, scooping the litter box. And then I have, you know, like a Garmin watch, so like my texts and stuff come through
Oh,
here.
yeah.
So I'm like literally down scooping, and then I get I think it was an Instagram DM from Susie Approved Book Tours. I think that's what it is. I might have gotten that wrong. And
Yeah.
she was like,
Susie approved. Yep.
and she sent me a screenshot of the USA Today list, and I was like, what? And then I was like, no,
So it
that
wasn't even your publishing team. It was Susie.
it was
Susie
Susan.
approved. She was
Yeah.
on top of it.
So I like come out, it's in my laundry room, and I come out and I'm like trying to like look at my watch, and my phone was in the kitchen where my 2 kids and my husband were doing breakfast. And I walk in and my husband's like, "Oh no, are you okay?" Because I guess my face was just like, wait, that
What?
can't be true. So I'm like trying to find my phone, and I'm like, and he's like, "It's over there." So I like get my phone and I pull it up, and I was just like, and he was like, "I don't know if this is good news or if this is bad news." He's like, "Your face is really unreadable right now." And then I like started to cry, and he was like, "Okay, now I really don't know
Oh,
what's happening." And
that's
then I
so
just like,
great.
and I was like, I hit the USA Today bestsellers list. And he's like, "So good news." I was, "Yeah." It's very good. I'm like
That
still
is
holding like the bag of like cat litter with poop in it. Like yeah, I was holding poop. But
Did you like walk through the day in a bit of a blur? Like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
it honestly took like hours for me to even fully understand what had happened.
Oh, that's the best story. And we should talk about your next book, which will also be a USA Today bestseller list once everybody hears what it is. And this one is that when you first told me about this, I was like, whoa. So tell us about your next book and the next woman you're going to be writing about.
Oh, I'm so excited about this one. We just got the title, so hopefully I don't mess it up. So it's Ace Marvel Spy.
So
And
that is the actual title and not just the like, we've got to turn something into Publishers Marketplace. This is the actual title.
yes. I'm pretty sure when we did the announcement, it was untitled. So now we have,
Okay.
yes, I haven't seen any covers yet, so it could still change. But right now it's Ace Marvel Spy, and it's about a woman named Alice Marble, not to be confused with Marvel. Um, and her story is just incredible. She in the 1930s was like the top female tennis player. She was an editor for Wonder Woman. She was a designer and she sang and she had like a talent agent. And then on top of all of that, World War II breaks out and she's approached by the Army Intelligence Program to go to Switzerland under the guise of playing tennis to spy on an ex-lover. So she's all the things.
You can't make this up. It's so
No.
cool.
Yeah, so I'm for anyone, so it's like the way that I'm kind of in my head like pitching it is it's like for readers of Kate Quinn and Taylor Jenkins Reid. So, can I have all of their readers, please?
And Wonder Woman. And we should say, and I don't think Jenni will mind my bringing this up, when we talked to Vanessa Miller, she talked about how the American Queen and that amazing story about the first queen on American soil came from Lisa Wingate's research. Lisa Wingate, New York Times bestselling author, stumbled upon this while writing, I think it was the Book of Friends, and knew that it wasn't her story to tell. And so wrote Vanessa Miller, did anyone who's a mutual acquaintance help you stumble upon this person, someone who we know and love here at Warwick, just to give a shout out to other authors who knew that it wasn't her story, but that you'd be awesome at it? Can we shout out to Janelle Sozelski? Because
it's so funny how it came along, and like Janelle and I joke about it now because Janelle had asked me to help her brainstorm women. And I was like, oh, absolutely. Like I have a whole long list. This will be so much fun. So I told her Alice Marble's name. And then like our brainstorm ended. I went on with my day. And then I started to panic because I was like, oh, I think I want to write about Alice. And I just told Janelle, and what if she writes about Alice and I lose the story? So I had this little like selfish moment where I was like, no, I want it back. Like, yeah, that was like, I knew
I'm
that.
sure, and Janelle is not about to start writing biofiction about tennis
No,
players.
she was like okay with it. But it was so funny because I called my agent, and because I'm a very anxious human being, and I called my agent and I was like, I just had a brainstorm with one of my friends and I can tell her not to use it, but like I really love this idea. And I like told my agent, and then she was just like, this is amazing. I'm gonna go talk to your editor. So she talked to our editor, and then within like minutes, it was like, okay, yeah, like this is gonna happen. So then I went back to Janelle and I was like, oh, how I just told you about Alice Marble? I was like, well, we're gonna scratch that one off your list. And she's like, I don't care. But it was just so funny, like how it came to be that I was helping somebody else brainstorm, and then I got all grabby hands.
And no, and Janelle and Jenni are actually quite tight. So this is not there's not competition. And I find usually the right stories end up with the people who are meant to tell the stories. Even as we all kind of brainstorm and help each other out, the right voice will end up writing. At least, because I'm an agent and I have 31 clients, and sometimes they stumble upon the same thing, but there's a lot of grace and leeway, and Janelle is an amazing writer in so many time periods, but tennis spy real woman is probably not her, but it is you. And I just think that it's quite incredible how that came about, because when you can have friends who help you stumble upon these amazing things, it makes the community in our writing world just so much tighter. So my final question before we get to any questions from all of you is the question that I ask every author that I talk to on this forum. And that is, are there any books you can recommend for us that you're reading or loving or have read and loved? Anything you want to shout out to, because we're always looking for our next read.
Yes. So I feel like there's so many amazing books that are coming out. So I'm going to hone in on historical fiction because I read historical fiction, and then I'll hone into like this week's new releases too. So I read Sarah Ackerman's newest one that came out.
Oh, the pilot one. Yeah.
Yeah. So the oh gosh, now I'm blanking on the title.
Told you it happens every time. The
Uncharted Flight of Olivia West.
Yes.
I read it at Galley early, and it was so good. I was obsessed with Olivia. Like Sarah's books are all amazing, all set in Hawaii, but this one was just so great. I loved it. And then I also read an early copy of Heather Webb's latest and greatest.
Oh, the Queens of London. So good.
Inspired by like the 40 Elephants, which is like an all-female gang in 1920s London. And it was phenomenal. So those are
like Peaky Blinders for women. If you've watched Peaky Blinders or you know it, then you have to read Queens of London.
Yes. Those are my two. I mean, both out, what's today, Wednesday? Oh my God, both out yesterday.
Yesterday. And Jenny will back me up on this. It's often hard because as authors and, interviewers and book promoters, I lose track of actual release days because I often read novels ages before they're actually even in novel form. It'll be someone's like Word document or PDF that I get mixed up, but those are both exceptional books. And just like Jenny, they feature really strong women in compelling scenarios. Jenny is one of the smartest writers I've ever met in my life. She inspires me because she's a perfect plotter and pacer, to the point where I have gone to my editor and said, I want to be more like Jenni Walsh in terms of like, get me out of describing everything in 800 words and just to move it along, because you just have such a cinematic way of telling a compelling story that has thrilling beats and keeps people glued to the page, while also learning so much about history and amplifying the voices of these women who are very much hallmarks and landmarks of some of the most amazing things to happen in the past several hundred years. So you are awesome. And I think, Julie, if you're back, we can wrap this up with any questions from everybody else. But everybody buy Unsinkable.
Thank you.
I think you did an amazing job with that interview, and we're going to probably just wrap up because I don't think we had it because honestly, you covered it amazingly, and Jenny can't wait for everybody to read this book. Honestly,
obviously the Ace Marvel Spy is going to be a pretty big deal. The fact that they snuck Marvel in the title. Actually, Jenny, did they have to clear anything for using Marvel? I guess because it's a word. You don't have to.
Yeah. So because it's so close to her last name, the press changed her name in like headlines and stuff from like Miss Marvel to Miss Marvel. So it kind of relates to like the headlines and stuff.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Cool. Oh, yeah. So cool. Can't wait for that too. Will that be next year, Jenny?
Sometime in 2025. We don't have a release date yet.
Okay.
Have you noticed this, Julie, that release dates are just dreams?
Right. Release dates are dreams.
In many cases, it's like, I'm seeing this more and more with authors. It's like sometime fallish.
And then a lot of it, truthfully, has to do with printing.
Yep. Yeah.
Because there's just such printing backlog that happens. And I'm so with you, Rachel, because I read too so well in advance, and I miss release dates all the time.
I always feel badly because
me too. Oh. And then I see it and I'm like, okay, I better promote that one. But Jenny, your story about finding out about the USA Today was amazing. I love that story.
Love it.
Love that.
So humble.
Just a bag of poop and just like, oh my God, so awesome. So for those of you that are watching, Rachel, if anybody wants to find out a little bit more about you, where would you like to direct them to do that?
Instagram, I'm RACHKMC, Rach K Mick. The same on Twitter. I talk a lot about the books I'm reading and loving. I try to just shout out to all the books I possibly can. And those are the best ways to find out about me and what I'm writing, which is always a lot. I've got 4 concurrent books going on at the same time.
I know. That's
it's-
real briefly. Tell us about those 4.
So I just got edits back for another novel I'm writing with Janelle Sazelsky and Amy Runyon. It's called The Liberty Scarf, and it's coming out-ish. And it's pretty wonderful. It's 3 different women in World War I Europe who are bound together by a scarf from Liberty of London. So it's very romantic. I'm also, we don't have a date yet, but Operation Scarlet is coming. It's my retelling of the Scarlet Pimpernel in World War II France, in Paris and Rouen. I am currently finishing a biography of Sir Christopher Wren, the architect, a opportunity that came out of the research I did for my novel, The London Restoration. So I'm working on that. And then I'm working on a top secret HarperCollins novel that I just am not talking about publicly yet, but will be the one that comes out after Operation Scarlet. And that is something that I think is just one of these amazing stories that hasn't been told. So I'm really excited for people to learn about that. But again, just keeping it under the hat for now.
Love it.
So that's what I do.
You're not busy or anything.
Not busy, no.
You don't have anything going on.
And fangirling over Jenni, because I just think she's the most amazing person who's always uplifting authors and always taking time to endorse books. And it's just amazing what she does.
Fantastic. So Jenni, for those that want to follow you and find out more about you and the books that you're recommending, where do you want to send people?
I'm just Jenni L. Walsh pretty much everywhere. And I spell Jenni with an I.
Okay.
Just to be cool. And
do you have a website? Do you have a website that you direct people to that have all your links there and stuff?
Yep, just JenniLWalsh.com.
Perfect.
When's your Happy Dog book coming out? You've got a children's book. Oh, we've got it now. Operation Happy, that's what it's called.
This one comes out April 2nd, and it's inspired by a young girl who survives the bombing at Pearl Harbor. And she copes with the war by completing a bucket list with her dog, Happy. And Happy's like the goodest dog ever. He's awesome.
I love it. We're such a dog-friendly store that any books about dogs, we're just like.
Jenni's office is a dog-friendly office.
We had dogs everywhere in this one. We had lots of cameos. Ladies, thank you so much for your time. I know that everybody completely enjoyed this conversation. So until the next book, Jenni, we'll see you. Rachel, until the next interview.
Yes.
Thank
I'll
you.
see you all. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.